I don't know about you guys, but I have a bad habit of finding a show and obsessing over it until I've watched every single episode as fast as humanly possible, and that's exactly what I did with Stranger Things. And after I marathoned the show, I was reading online and discovered that the show's actually loosely inspired by real events, and my mind was absolutely blown. For a while now, I've had a request to cover the Montauk project, and until I started researching, I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole actually went. I think we have to start with Camp Hero, a decommissioned military base that's located in Montauk, New York, and it's once thought to have been the site for multiple government-sanctioned human experiments. And some of these experiments are thought to be just as bad as those that were done by the Nazis in the concentration camps. So if we fast forward to 2021, when you Google Camp Hero, you'll discover that it's now a 755-acre state park that features forests, wetlands, and an amazing view of the Atlantic Ocean. But even with all of its beauty, there's still old crumbling structures that are boarded shut and covered with do not enter signs. I mean, really, Camp Hero seems to be the perfect place if you like your nature, with a side of kidnapping, telepathy experiments, and portals to other times and dimensions. Many people who have visited Camp Hero have reported feeling very uneasy and never being able to shake the feeling that they're not alone or that they're always being watched. And I think to explain those feelings, we have to jump into the theories. Now, a majority of these theories come from the book The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, which was published back in 1992 by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. The book actually confirmed what a lot of people living around Montauk had already suspected, that the former base was once ground zero for one of the most dangerous and secretive projects in US history. Back in the 1970s and the 1980s, Nichols was actually the leader of the psychotronics movement, and he went as far as to claim that government agents were using electromagnetic radiation to send ideas directly into people's heads. But that's not all. Nichols also amassed a pretty substantial following, some of which to this day wear solid metal pots on their head to block microwaves and claim that he could actually control the weather. He also claims that he was teleported to Montauk back in 1968 and claims that he worked on Camp Hero's semi-automatic ground environment, or SAGE, radio tower. Even with all the weird details aside, Nichols isn't alone in his suspicions. A film titled The Montauk Chronicles was actually released back in 2015 and was even featured on an episode of The Dark Files on the History Channel. The director of the film was quoted as saying, "I started hearing all of these strange and bizarre stories about Montauk. A real multitude of things that were not anomalous and were not normal." Okay, now if you're anything like me, you likely hear things like telepathic and teleportation experiments and want to write it off, but the details in this one make it pretty hard. Stranger things have happened just in the US alone. Think about the MK Ultra program back in 1953 or Operation Paperclip just shortly after World War II. The Montauk project seems a lot more plausible. And then, like most of these cases, like clockwork, things got even weirder. Back in July of 2008, a carcass of a beaked, hairless creature washed up on the shores of Montauk. The three friends that discovered it claimed that they found the animal at Ditch Plains Beach, which is just 4 miles west of Camp Hero. Local newspapers speculated that the corpse had been washed up from Plum Island and was an experiment from the government's secretive animal disease center gone terribly wrong. Most scientists have disputed this by saying it was just a badly decomposed raccoon, but others are still skeptical. And while it isn't a direct fit with the Montauk project, this carcass, dubbed the Montauk Monster, just adds way more pieces to the already complicated puzzle. At the center of most conspiracy theories and Camp Hero is the Cold War era SAGE Tower, which was once a mother station to a series of smaller manned radar towers located along the coast. This network of towers was said to have offered the United States an extra 30 minutes of warning time in the event of an incoming Soviet nuclear attack, so it was quite impressive. An expert on the topic stated that every 12 seconds when the radar tower would rotate, there would be animals freaking out, people getting headaches and bad dreams, and people's electronic equipment would go absolutely haywire. There were 12 of these towers in total, scattered all across the country, and the one at Camp Hero is the only one that remains. It is a 90-foot tall concrete tower and a 40-foot wide steel dish that is visible for miles, and while it's no longer active, the dish will still change positions to this very day. According to many die-hard believers, sadistic experiments took place below the radar tower in secret laboratories that were connected by a series of confusing tunnels. Allegedly, thousands of children were taken from the street and kept below ground. They were abused and programmed into super soldiers that were known as the Montauk Boys. And by using power frequencies, scientists supposedly tapped into the consciousness and controlled the minds of these impressionable children. Now, many people have noted that present-day Camp Hero still has many secrets left to be uncovered. Most point to the presence of the manhole covers and the gates and suggest that the visible buildings might just be the tip of the iceberg. Official government-issued blueprints say otherwise, but many are still obsessed with discovering what they believe is still hiding underground in Camp Hero. Before Camp Hero became an official park, Brian Minnick and his friends were actually able to explore inside the radio tower. And while they didn't find any evidence of a government cover-up, they did discover documents and sealed entrances, suggesting that the infrastructure is far more complex than people know and that the base operated for much longer than local officials admit. Minnick found records of mass quantities of food ordered to the base in the late 80s, long after the military had formally left town. Many believers also point to the brightly painted walls and psychedelic pattern wallpaper as evidence that the captive children were also subjected to acid tests. Okay, so let's get away from some of the theories that we can't actually verify and focus on some ones that we can. Camp Hero was first commissioned by the US Army back in 1942 as a coastal defense station, and the purpose of the base was to defend New York against an attack by German ships. The enormous concrete gun batteries are close to the public and tightly sealed. They seem to recede into the hillsides with vines creeping over top of them. And eerily enough, at some point someone scratched the words "Stranger, help me" into the concrete. And adding to all the weirdness, the government actually attempted to disguise the base as a fishing village. Many structures were designed to look like cottages with fake wood siding and painted on windows. The gym was actually disguised as a church, and this can all still be seen today, along with the decaying downtown that you can actually visit. Officially, the Army deactivated the base in 1947, and it was then transferred over to the Air Force in 1951. That's when the radar was installed and the anti-aircraft artillery training began. The Air Force remained until the land was deemed environmentally important, and then it was donated to the National Park Service. And then the National Park Service transferred ownership over to the New York State's Parks Department, and it was officially opened to the public back in 2002. So what do you guys think? Is it possible that these stories are true? Let me know in the comments down below, because for the first time in a while, I'm left with far more questions than answers at the end of a video. And with that being said, I think we're going to have to add Camp Hero and the Montauk conspiracy to our never-ending, but are always growing Tales from the Dark.